Hi, and welcome back to U.S. History with me, Mr. Snyder, and today we're going to discuss the Second Great Awakening and emphasis on religion and reform in the early 1800s. Learning targets today are to discuss the Second Great Awakening, describe the discrimination that some religious groups faced, and discuss the various social movements that arose during the 1800s. So the Second Great Awakening, we've discussed the first, one of the causes of the American Revolution, about the emphasis on religion and worshiping God ourselves. This Second Great Awakening begins in Kentucky on the frontier and then spreads north and south. And these people believe that reviving this religious participation is crucial to the country's future. Because churches back then, just as they sort of are now, were kind of where people met up. Like, they live within, they don't live within 10 miles of anybody, and then they meet up at church on Sunday, and it's kind of their social outlet. And so it's crucial to the country's future. Charles Grandison Finney is an influential revivalist who goes around and kind of talks about churches, talks about God, talks about, what it is like to be a true Christian. And he's a great speaker, so he riles up crowds. Crowds of hundreds and thousands of people come to see him during this time. New churches also pop up during this time, like the Unitarian Church, the AME Church, and most importantly, probably the Mormon Church, led by Joseph Smith, begins during this time and then eventually moves westward. One reason why people work for the social reforms we're going to talk about is because of this revival of religion, and that if God says to treat your fellow man like you would want yourself to be treated, the golden rule, then we need to work for social reform so that we are treating our neighbors like we would like to be treated. So religious persecution during this time, however, Mormons are seen as not really a religion. They isolate themselves with practices like polygamy or the keeping of more than one wife, and that was frowned upon by other churches. Now Mormons today don't do that, or a lot of them don't, but it was frowned upon back then, and they were not considered a religion. They were more of a cult. And Joseph Smith was eventually murdered by an angry mob, and then the new leader of the church, Brigham Young, takes them all the way west to the Great Salt Lake in Utah, and that is where they set up shop, and that's where they remain to this day. Most Catholics are poor Irish immigrants, so people get the idea that if you're Catholic, you're an Irish immigrant here to take a job of a working American, because immigrants will usually work for less, and we'll get to that when we discuss the influx of immigrants in the 1800s. But these poor Irish immigrants were looked down upon, and therefore their religion was looked down upon as well. And then Jewish people come here to escape some political unrest that is going on in Europe at the time. But they have a problem, and they're facing discrimination because most state constitutions require public officials to be Christian. So they can't get anybody into office to advocate for their beliefs and their needs, so they continue to be discriminated against. One other thing we'll discuss is the Sabbatarian controversy during the 1800s. And these reformers who are working with the churches urge the federal government to ban business and the mail on Sundays, since in Christianity it is a day of rest. But because of the separation of church and state, the government refuses to do this. Congress goes as far as to stop mail delivery on Sundays, but they say we're not going to stop business, we're not going to prevent people from doing business if they want on the Christian Sabbath. And so that was the Sabbatarian controversy. Different social reforms during this time. Dorothea Dix is a person who advocates for people with mental disabilities, because before they were just put into prisons with regular criminals even though they had done nothing wrong. There's really nobody to look after these people with mental disorders, And so she advocates the building of mental institutions and hospitals where these people can be cared for instead of just put into prisons with regular criminals. And then there's the temperance movement, which is the tempering or the reduction of alcohol and drinking and people who drink too much. Most of these people are women and children because these reformers blame family abuse on alcohol. The father or the man, the husband goes out, gets too drunk, comes home, and takes it out on his children. And there's too much of that going on. So these women and children are advocating for the temperance movement. And alcohol basically causes all of society's problems, according to these people: poverty, sickness, and family abuse. This temperance movement right now is met with little support and success. It'll gain success later on in the 1900s during the progressive movement and eventually lead to prohibition, or the prohibiting of alcohol. Some states do pass laws limiting the sale of alcohol, such as Indiana. I believe it's the only state in the union still not allowed to sell alcohol on Sundays. And reformers today continue to push for alcohol sales on Sunday, but they don't get any success. We still don't have alcohol sales on Sunday. Then finally, Horace Mann works for education reform. And reformers are working for education reform because they think that education is the key to making people better democratic citizens and making them, or teaching them, a skill so that they can improve economic growth of the country. And so Horace Mann convinces states to set aside funding for public schools. And in a few decades, free schooling is the norm in the North. You can go to school for free. You don't have to pay or be privileged. Every child has a right to go to school. And that is all for this short section. We'll talk more about it in class. Bring your learning targets and any questions that you may have, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.